Module 3 is case studies. In this module, I use my own experience as a trauma therapist and pick a case vignette to present to you, which we then unpack together to learn about some themes, some very common themes in sexual trauma. One of them being child sexual abuse, one of them being the attachment styles in adult relationships, and one of them being power imbalances in adult relationships. I'm going to read out one of my case vignettes to you. A client of mine who I've been working for a very long time, for 10 years. Names are changed, identities are changed, and their consent is very much with me. So I'm not revealing anyone's personal information, just so you know if you are worried about that. I hope this particular vignette will help you understand, especially if you are partnered with someone who has experienced sexual trauma, or if you are experiencing sexual trauma yourself, how child sexual abuse, what I spoke about just now in this previous model, can really impact adult relationship dynamics. And that is why we're talking a lot about adult attachment, and we're trying to understand adult attachment, the way we love and the way we hurt in adult romantic, sexual and non-romantic relationships. Please remember, there's always a trigger warning. So if this is too triggering, please stop and take care of yourself. When I was 5 years old, our family driver G played a sex game with me. All I remember is coconut trees, open skies, and a weird sensation in my body. I told my father, and G was fired right the next day. I don't know if it was traumatic for me or not, Neha. This is what my client said to me. I don't know if it was assault. I don't know if it was rape. I don't know if it was trauma or not, because I didn't even register that experience in my body. I thought that event had absolutely no impact on me until I realized when I turned 21 that I had violated my girlfriend's boundaries during sex. The old sex game flashed in my mind, and I pushed her to play it with me as we were being intimate. And my girlfriend, she didn't like it too much. After doing some inner work, I now realize that so many of my relationships have been unequal, where I have been the caretaker of younger partners. I have had the upper hand in them sometimes. But Neha, I feel powerless in them all the time. I don't know what to do. By Indira. Name changed on why she feels so disconnected from her sexual needs, desires, and interests. When we think about child sexual abuse, we often think about a ghastly scenario where there's a stereotypical rapist who comes out, who's this very nasty looking person and who has planned it and comes out from the bushes and attacks a child and is so pedophilic in their desires that they hurt this kid, and then NGO and non-profit people come and protect this kid and tell the family, and the child is safe. A lot of media is responsible for such blatant, exaggerated stereotypes. Not that they don't happen. Of course they do happen, but they are not the norm. In sexual trauma, as a field, as a sex therapist, as someone who works in the field of trauma therapy, I can tell you for a fact that a lot of people who perpetrate sexual abuse are people that we know. They tend to be familiar to the victim. They tend to be people in our families. They tend to be people in our work settings. Somebody who has some familiarity with their survivor or victim who will manipulate that relationship. So it's not surprising why Indira blocked out this memory that she's talking about, right, from her childhood. That memory just does not match the stereotype of rapist that we carry in our minds, which is why a lot of us don't take sexual violence that seriously. We're like, are you sure? Are you sure that's what happened? Are you sure they touched you like that? Are you sure they're lying? Are you sure they're not lying? Maybe you made it up. Maybe you are just too much into social media, social justice. Oh, you're Me Too'd. So we say a lot of these very insulting, attacky stereotypes to people because we don't connect the statistics, because we are not educated in statistics, to see that sexual trauma actually lives everywhere. We live in a traumatized culture everywhere in the world, not necessarily specific to this location. We live in our bodies in an oppressive environment, right? In our internal, because our external realities are so traumatized, our internal realities also tend to be quite traumatized. Until we learn to make the link between what is happening today, just like Indira did, what's happening in her adult life with her girlfriend, where she's always playing savior and dating very, very young women, but not realizing that has something to do with what happened to her. She's crossing boundaries with her girlfriend today and not realizing someone very, very far back in her trauma history abused her boundaries sexually and did not give her body a chance to figure out what her boundaries were for herself. And that, my friends, is a very beautiful but painful reality of sexual assault, child sexual abuse, and adult sexuality that it tends to be ungrounded, confused, lost, or oppressed in some way. When I first came to this work, I had been conditioned and trained in a very binary idea of what survivors look like and who perpetrators are. From textbooks, from school studies, from what people say around, right? So when this person came to me, they presented a very deep and painful reality for a lot of us who are in this field, a lot of us who experience sexual trauma, which is that, and please know, not everybody has to agree with me on this, but the fact remains that a lot of us are both. We have survived sexual violence, we have also perpetrated sexual violence and sexual trauma. And when I say that, I'm trying to offer the example, it's just please consider it. Please don't consider it if it doesn't make sense to you, that crossing someone's boundaries sexually, even in the dating phase, is a form of not knowing how to ask, not knowing what feels good to them, not knowing what feels good to you. And it is kind of impossible to date and to not be in violation with someone somewhere, in some reality of yours. Not saying everybody has perpetrated some malicious harm, but in some way we are all part of a society that is both oppressed and is also oppressive, and we live in these intersections. So when this particular client came to me, I felt a real deep sense of resonance with her, which is why I created 6 life-sized art pieces on working with people who explicitly identify as being both. In my trauma work journey, I got a lot of pushback for working in this dichotomy, but I found as a therapist I wouldn't be doing justice to who I am as a practitioner if I didn't go deep into what is not a binary, in the non-binary nature of sexual trauma. So this case took a big emotional load on me, especially the first 5 years as I was working through it, because this client taught me to look at my own reflection of a traumatized identity and an identity where I may have crossed someone's boundaries without asking them. Right? I know in my conscious mind I have not done that, but could I have? So that led me to this entirely very beautiful space of, and very strong and powerful space of trauma and recovery, right? Which means, and to be very spiritually existential about it, Rumi says, the wound is also where the light is. So sometimes when we take time slowly to unpack the wounds, and the more messier the wounds are, the more sometimes we can find that our power kind of lies right in the intersection of the wounding. And that exactly happened for me. I learned about boundaries like that. I learned how to hold space for dichotomies like that in myself, in my clients. I learned about sexual trauma. I went very deep into it. I did a whole master's in it. I expanded my practice into working with many, many people of many, many identities who were scared to say that they would like to look at both of these parts of themselves and actually work towards some sort of integration. So for me, a lot of this narrative comes from joining the dots, and I hope as I'm sharing my experience, there are parts of you that are able to join some dots for yourself. And of course, please know, if it doesn't feel resonant now, doesn't mean it's untrue for you. Maybe it'll take time. Maybe it'll come to you in a completely different form. As we say, the truth is often quite silent. Judith Herman, the very popular feminist trauma therapist, always says that the truth needs space to be worked out. I'm paraphrasing, but she says it very beautifully, and she says, without pain, and not an enjoyment of pain, but without containment of pain, one can't really get to the root of a memory and really elicit truth out of it. So in some ways, when I'm speaking about trauma and recovery, I'm going to connect to what happened with Indira, the same client who I worked with for a decade, who came back into therapy with her partner and said, you know, therapist, I really appreciate this much journey that I've had with you. I've healed in these ways. I've understood some of my trauma work. I have made some connections for me, and I've got some grip. I'm grounded now. But a core tenet of trauma work is the next step. That next step is about recovery, reconnection. It's not in stabilization and just being okay. It's more than okay. It's making something from your wound. And remember, not everyone gets here in the way that I am saying it. People might have different journeys with it. So I'm going to take Indira's example and build further on it. I'm just going to read the vignette for you of when she came in with her partner. Remember, names and identities are changed, so please don't go trying to find who Indira is. Indira, name changed, is a 34-year-old Bengali-speaking middle-class woman who ended a heteronormative marriage after 8 years. She found herself less and less interested in growing together with her cis male partner at the time and her then husband, and found herself exploring growing intimacies with her cis female bisexual boss. She then came to sex therapy when she was on the brink of wanting to explore sexual intimacy with her boss, but also wanted to not cheat on her marital partner. She experienced disconnection from her sexuality, from her ethics, and was keen to understand why. A lot of Indira's journey may resonate with you. And a lot of it is also evident in these little attachment objects that she and I used to make often together in sex therapy, where we would create parts of her body that she felt very dysphoric towards. She expressed a lot of shame masturbating. She used to express a lot of shame even touching or being in connection with her clit or her entire vulva as an entity. In some ways, this is another example of someone in a different country. This is an example of her work, representation of her work. She used to feel a lot of shame in even telling me these things, as is extremely, extremely common. Nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to guilt yourself over if you find this a hard topic to talk to your therapist, doctor, or friend about, right? And over a long, long period of time, as she got more and more comfortable with me in our relationship, we were able to get to why that dysphoria existed for her and how for her it was connected to sexual shame. Remember, gender dysphoria, body dysphoria is not always connected to sexual shame. It can be connected to many different things. But for Indira, it was connected to what had happened to her as a child. So when she came into therapy and she brought her partner, I got really excited for her because I felt like this was a next level for her to really confront the systems in which she lives and not only focus her recovery on herself. Over time, as you can see in those images, she ended up creating a lot of beautiful artwork on her idea of femininity. And she used makeup, lipsticks, nail polish, fake nails, glitter, eyelashes to express how angry she was at the submission, at like how small people like her with bodies like her were made to feel where she grew up. And in some ways, she made a lot of connections through her art practice over the next year or two, really uncovering that that feminine part of her that she labeled feminine was actually a source of incredible strength and joy for her. And that opened up her own queer sexuality. Over a long period of time, she was able to not cheat on her partner actually, and her partner and her were able to come to a really solid understanding of what they need in their relationship. And it's not always a happy ending like this one, but I'm sharing this with you because in this case, it was a very endearing example of what happens when trauma survivors like ourselves really do the inner work with someone that they trust and can push to the next level of their healing. Sources of joy are then in abundance, which survivors may not have thought was possible for them ever in their life. So a large part of recovery is discovering what gives you strength, what gives you joy, what gives you grounding, what gives you resilience, what gives you power, and how you can have the courage to go towards that even when it feels scary and it feels very close to the first couple of traumas in your life.